September the 11th, Richard B. Myers, Vice Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, in the absence of Chairman Shelton, was the temporary head of all U.S. Armed Forces.
On 9/11, General Richard Myers steps in as acting chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff.
It was, from my viewpoint, a very professional scene. There was no panic, no undue alarm.
Late today, Pentagon sources told CBS's Bob Orr that contrary to early reports, U.S. Air Force jets did get into the air on Tuesday while the attacks were underway. Bob, what can you tell us about that?
Well, Dan, we do now know tonight, as the terrorist attack was unfolding on Tuesday, the U.S. military scrambled fighter jets in a desperate attempt to intervene. At 8:44, 2 F-15s received a scramble order at Otis Air Force Base on Cape Cod. But 2 minutes later, at 8:46, American Airlines Flight 11, the first hijacked jet, slammed into the World Trade Center.
Yet 1 week after 9/11, in response to initial reports that the military failed to defend our domestic airspace during the hijacks, NORAD issued an official chronology which stated that the FAA notified NORAD of the second hijacking at 8:43. Wrong. FAA notified NORAD of the third hijacking at 9:24. According to your report, wrong. FAA notified NORAD of the fourth hijacking at an unspecified time, and that prior to the crash in Pennsylvania, Langley F-16 combat air patrol planes were in place, remaining in place to protect Washington, D.C. All untrue. In public testimony before your 9/11 Commission in May of 2003, NORAD officials stated, I assume under oath, that at 9:16 they had received the hijack notification of United Flight 93 from the FAA. That hijacking did not occur until 9:28. There was a routine cockpit transmission recovered at 9:27. And in that testimony before you, NORAD officials stated also that at 9:24 they received notice of the hijacking of the third plane, American Flight 77. Also untrue according to your report.
The 9/11 Commission is expected to release its final report next month, but today's presentation, called a staff statement, was dramatic and powerful. It focused on how the federal government reacted to the hijackings on 9/11. Today's statement also included a detailed timeline.
I mean, NORAD stood up at the first hearing and had a chart which listed how many minutes, you know, that they were informed of something, which totally changed. Not one place in the media did I see them go into, what do you mean? How did NORAD come to the first hearings and the FAA with timelines that were not true? You know, why would that happen? And I don't remember anybody in the media following up on the delay in intercept time. I remember them taking whatever the commission said as fact.
Yet NORAD's public chronology on 9/18/01 and their commission testimony 20 months later covered up those truths. They lied to the American people, they lied to Congress, and they lied to your 9/11 Commission to create a false impression of competence, communication, coordination, and protection of the American people. And we can set up all of the oversight possible at great additional cost to the American taxpayers, and it won't be worth an Enron pension if the people responsible lie to us. If they take their records and doctor them into falsehoods, and if they get away with it. Because for almost 3 years now, NORAD officials and FAA officials have been able to hide their critical failures that left this country defenseless during 2 of the worst hours in our history. And I believe that President Bush must call those responsible for those representations to account. If the Commission's accounts are correct, he should fire whoever at FAA, at NORAD, or anywhere else betrayed their public trust by not telling us the truth. And then he should clear up a few discrepancies of his own.
On September 10th, Brigadier General W. Montague Winfield asked Junior Officer Captain Charles Leidig to temporarily replace him as Director of Operations at the Pentagon Command Center from 8:30 a.m. on September 11th. Later that day, after Flight 93 was reported crashed, Winfield resumed control. Captain Leidig had only just completed a course qualifying him to run the command center.
Auch der Brigadegeneral Montague Winfield hat keine Verantwortung an dem Tag und zu diesen Stunden getroffen. Wir wissen nicht, wo er abgeblieben ist. Das National Military Command Center wird also offensichtlich nicht von dem zuständigen General geleitet, sondern der zuständige General hat an dem Tag einen Captain gebeten, bitte schön die Leitung des Command Centers zu übernehmen. Captain Charles Leidig, der das auch das allererste Mal macht. Und weil er so wunderbar die Vereinigten Staaten an diesem Tag verteidigt hat, wird er natürlich danach auch gleich zum Vizeadmiral. Vom Captain zum Vizeadmiral in 2 Jahren. Er wird befördert.
Back in 1997, a group of Washington heavyweights, almost all of them neoconservatives, formed an organization called the Project for the New American Century.
Inside this building, behind this door, is the brain trust that some suspect has led the U.S. to the brink of war.
Included Donald Rumsfeld, Dick Cheney, Paul Wolfowitz, Robert Zoellick, John Bolton.
10 are now in the Bush administration. The letter to Mr. Clinton was, in essence, a preview of arguments that would have a more receptive audience 5 years later. That letter argued the case for a comprehensive political and military strategy for bringing down Saddam and his regime. A 76-page white paper circulating for a year and arguing for an aggressive U.S. foreign policy suddenly gained new relevance. In the blueprint, it says the process of transformation is likely to be a long one, absent some catastrophic and catalyzing event like a new Pearl Harbor. Was 9/11 your Pearl Harbor?
I think it was the country's Pearl Harbor. I think it was the president's Pearl Harbor.
Barely 5 hours after American Airlines Flight 77 plowed into the Pentagon, the Secretary of Defense was telling his aides to start thinking about striking Iraq. And at 2:40, the notes quote him as saying he wanted best info fast. Judge whether good enough to hit SH, meaning Saddam Hussein. At the same time, not only UBL, the initials used to identify Osama bin Laden. Go massive, the notes quote him as saying. Sweep it all up, things related and not.
The project has a vision beyond a regime change in Iraq, a vision in which the United States government inserts itself in other failed regimes in the Middle East. So this truly does become a new American century.
How will we know when this war is won? Vice President Cheney says it might not end in our lifetime.
I think that may be correct. I think this is going to be a long, hard-fought conflict, and it will be global in scale. And it won't be, as I mentioned earlier, it won't be just military. It's going to be all the instruments of our national power with our friends and allies. And the fact that it could last several years or many years or maybe our lifetimes would not surprise me.
On September the 11th, Brigadier General David F. Worley Jr. was commander of the Andrews Air Force Base, the nearest one to the Pentagon.